and I think this is good. So this is good fiction.
Well, yeah, yes, exactly. That's right. And I'm not saying it's bad fiction. Uh, by the way, I think we're live. So let me check with Kathy. Kathy says we're live. We're live. So we're live. And Pablo,
Great.
you're what time is it over there for you?
Here is 10 a.m., 10 and half a.m.
In
in Argentina,
Yay.
Argentine.
Hey, it's on my list. I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get there eventually. You know,
Oh,
you
great.
know, you
You
know.
can
Last week, I
come home.
spoke to Aleda last week. Did you know that
What?
we did a class last week? Your fellow countrywoman and I did a lesson together last week.
Oh, yes. I didn't know.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
I,
so
I
yeah, so
missed it. Sorry.
no worries. It's fine. I
With
wasn't here.
Aleida.
Yes, I wasn't here either. It was
Ah, great.
one of my clones. I have I have several different ones, and sometimes I'm Prime Luke, is what I call myself, the original. But then there are three clones that I will use for different things. One of them is usually outside doing yard work. Um, one of them will do
But
sometimes
how
do
how can you know
yeah.
how can you know who is the real one? Perhaps it's not you.
Oh, it's yeah, of course. We've got tattoos. Mine says 001, so it's got to be. I got to be. That's got to be me.
Yes.
Um, that's a Stranger Things reference to people who haven't watched season 4 yet.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Have you seen the most recent
The first
season of?
season. No, no. I only watched the first one.
Oh, okay. Okay. Season 4 is actually pretty good. I think it's my favorite one so far. Except yeah, except maybe the last episode of the season. You know how sometimes the
Oh,
last episode of a season they're trying to do too much, and so it just
mm,
feels like chaos. It was a little bit like that, but it's still good. It's still quite good. Yes, so we're going to be talking about some stuff today, but we both read let's call it a short story.
I don't know if you really read it, but
I read it.
I will trust you
Why do you doubt that? Why would you, how dare you?
because you say you didn't think it is good,
No,
and I
that's not what
think
I didn't say that. How dare you once again? Okay, so we read Tlön, Uqbar, Orbis, Tertius. Is that how to pronounce it correctly? Is that right?
yes. I
Close
don't
enough,
know
right?
because Orbius Tertius is in
Yeah,
Latin,
so
right?
nobody knows.
Orbis Tertius.
Well, when I
No,
see when I see Tius, my brain naturally goes shus instead of Tertius, but maybe in the original Latin the pronunciation would have been something like Tertius instead of Tertius. So,
Tertius. Yes, or Tertius. Tertius. More like in Spanish, I think, or like Italian, because Latin
probably
is similar to Italian.
right, that's the closest language to
Tertius.
to Latin. Okay. Okay. I'm easy with that, so that's fine.
Yes,
And
yes.
and so we read this, and we're going to be going over it and talking about it a little bit. But I want to be clear: I didn't say I didn't like it. I just have some thoughts about it. But
I
do
showed
you?
him.
Um,
Relax.
Well, actually, what I wanted to ask you is, did you read both the English version and the Spanish version? You
Yes,
did.
I did.
Okay. So
Yes.
I'm very curious how well it translates. I think it's really interesting how you translate something, and some people even say things cannot be fully appreciated translated. I don't think that, but
Hmm.
I mean,
Yes.
reading both versions, what do you think about both Spanish and the English?
Well, if we are talking about Borges and translations, I
Borges is the
must say
author,
that
just so
Borges,
people know.
yes, and Borges or Borges, if you want,
I think it's pronounced
he
Borges no matter what. I haven't heard a lot of people say Borges. That would be like a French
okay.
pronunciation, right? Wouldn't it? Sounds more French.
Hmm.
Or Borgia or something.
Let's say Borges.
Let's do it.
Here we say Borges. Borges wrote a lot about the theme of translations, the topic of translations.
Yeah.
He started translating when he was very child. I think at 9 or 10 years old, he translated some text of I don't know the,
From what language to what
the
language?
name is very famous. He wrote
But from what to
no
what? What?
no 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 from English to Spanish because he had parents. I think her father, no, her mother was a very good English speaker. She was the descendant of English family.
I see. Was his English good? Did he speak English well? Did he read English well? I imagine he read it well.
Borges, yes,
Okay.
very
Because I
good at English. But
he lectured in the United States for a while, right? Didn't he traveled to the United States in the 1950s, right? And did like
uh-huh.
lecture tours in English, I thought.
Yes. But he maintained the Spanish pronunciation. But when I listened to the recordings of him talking in English, he's like very fluent, and he read a lot of English literature in the original language.
Now I'm very
Yes,
curious.
and he wrote a lot about translations. He thought that a good translation could be better than the original.
That's very interesting. So I mean, I definitely want to talk about the language part. As an English teacher, I'm fascinated by what language does to the brain and what its connection is to our brains. And so I think we can definitely get into that. But now I'm very curious to hear Borges speaking English. Let me see if I can find. I'm just curious if I can find something.
Go on.
Yeah, let's see.
Regarding the okay.
English subtitles. That can't be right.
At that
Uh,
time, when he's an old man, he was completely blind.
okay. Okay. This one maybe? Might be this one. Let's
Okay.
see. If
Poems to be published by MSC in Buenos Aires, and then a book of short stories to be published by MSC in Buenos Aires. And I'm writing off and on all the time, since I have nothing else to do. I live by myself.
Well, no, you say that you dislike your work. Do you also
I don't
dislike
like-
working?
No, I enjoy working, but I don't like the work. You know what Carlyle said? Carlyle said that all work is contemptible, but that doing that work is not contemptible. It may be the only justification for a man. And I think he was right. Because
His accent is quite strong.
What does it mean, contemptible? I didn't know that word.
Contemptible means he hates it. He's saying work is a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing, but it's the only thing I have to do. That's pretty funny.
This is interesting because he says that, but he doesn't say he thinks that. And the story Tlön, Uqbar, Orbis, Tertius starts with that idea because his friend Bioy Casares says something, and Bioy Casares says that he read it in that encyclopedia,
Yes.
and that this is a sentence of Uqbar, and Borges thinks, but when they find that in the encyclopedia there is no entry about that, Borges thinks that Bioy Casares say that in order to not say that was his idea. Does that a lot.
You mean in real life he would do the same thing? He would make statements. Yeah, make statements that weren't necessarily his views.
Like this interview.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think about that sort of thing a lot.
Or it was his view, but he what?
Go ahead. It was his view, but what?
No. I say that perhaps it was his view, but he likes want to have this shield to say this guy said that.
Right. Well, that's again part of the idea of language is, I think I like to see language as it's a layer of the world that we get to have that is almost unique or special to humans, and it's really, really close to our idea of magic. So when he does that, he is like casting a magical spell in front of himself that is creating maybe two ways to understand what he's saying, and that is affecting different people in different ways. So it's almost like saying, I want some people to really understand me and some people to be confused, and that's what I want. And that's like magic, which is very cool, I think. Well, I think probably the best thing to do.
Yes, and all this story is.
Because we have a delay, Pablo. We have a bit of a delay, so sometimes I'm saying something,
and
then you say
have
something.
a delay.
Yeah. Can we do this? Can you give a basic summary of the story, right? Because I didn't read it twice, and then once we have a basic summary, then we twice, then we can talk about it.
I will try. The story is like
there is
this.
no try.
Borges is with his friend. Okay. Borges is with his friend. They are talking, and his friend says something. I'll read it. I'll read it. His friend says, one sentence, a sentence that is that one of the heresiarchs, that is a strange word. I don't know how to say it, and even in Spanish, I needed to look for it. It's like heresy.
So heresy is when you kind of say something against the traditional view, especially in Christianity. If you're the one who says something like Mary was not the mother of Jesus, anything that's against the traditional view, you're and a person who studies it is a heresiologist, and there's a whole series of books about it.
Right. This guy was a heresiarch, right? Someone who made heresies. So the sentence was that one of the heresiarchs of Uqbar had declared that mirrors and copulation are abominable because they increase the number of men.
Right.
I think
Abominable.
this is a good one.
It's interesting, yeah. Just to explain that, the idea that mirrors, because they reflect, are abominable. Abominable means sort of against nature, or a crime against decency, or against common nature, and so there's something horrible about them. And the reason that this one is horrible is that it increases the number of men because of reflection.
Yes, I think those friends they had misanthropic conversation, and in that conversation, misanthropic, they said that because it was written during a second World War II, right?
Yep.
So I think perhaps they were thinking humanity is horrible. We don't need more humans. Even if a mirror is making a new human, that's bad.
So that's the initial idea, but maybe you could sort of give a higher level, more higher level
Yes,
summary, just
I'll
of
try.
the main ideas.
Yes. Then Borges says to his friend, where did you get it? I don't think that exists, Uqbar. So his friend says,
Uqbar. Yeah.
yes, Uqbar, yes, Uqbar. And his friend says, it is on the Encyclopedia Britannica. And Borges says, here we have one tome. And they look for this entry.
1902 Encyclopedia Britannica, right?
Right. And they didn't find it. So Borges thinks that Bioy, his friend, say that because of his modesty in order to justify a statement.
Right.
Uh,
He wants to say it, but doesn't want to say it directly. Almost like the idea of wanting to say things, but not wanting to put them in the form of nonfiction, and instead trying to disguise it in a story.
yes,
Maybe.
yes. It's like the reverse.
Yeah.
Yes, because I think the old story is like a joke about that. What is real, what not, what is your opinion, what is not, and well,
Right.
all that kind of thoughts. Uh, but then happens that when his friend goes home, he looks for the encyclopedia and he finds that the Uqbar article was there.
Mm-hmm.
So they start to find to look to search for another encyclopedias to comprove if there existed this place Uqbar.
They want to try to establish whether or not this place Uqbar was real.
Yes, but they didn't find that. Yeah. Right. So it was the only entry in that encyclopedia, and they thought that it was fake. So later,
then we get into Tlön.
Yes, because they in the story they read this entry, this fake entry about Uqbar, right? And Uqbar is like a country, and in this country, the people of this country believes that there is some word, like a mythical word named Tlön.
Tlön. So now we have a place that seems fictional, that where in this place that seems fictional, people believe in another, it's like another Earth, kind of like almost like a it's almost like a parallel universe but fictional, called
Exactly.
Tlön. And in this place, Tlön, these people have some very extreme views compared to what most people believe about the world, especially in the way that they use language and what they think reality is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I did read it.
Yes, yes, yes. And this part is very interesting, very philosophical.
Yep.
Is the part most like an essay, like you said.
It is an essay.
Yes, it can be. And later, it happens to be that there was like a sect.
A sect
No.
is a small religion. It's like
Yes.
well, sect is a general word, SECT, which just means sort of a special group. But actually, I think he's modeling that on. He mentions the hermetics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Specifically, he speaks about Rosa Cruz.
So the Rosicrucians, actually, most people now believe that the Rosicrucians never existed. This is a brotherhood that was formed around this guy named Christian Rosenkreuz. And this secret brotherhood came up, and they had a creed. And after Christian Rosenkreuz died, the brothers went around the world to start their own little groups and sort of spread the message, but it was very secretive. Actually, probably never existed, but that's Rosicrucianism is the idea. I think he's basing it on that, right?
Yes, and Borges says that there is a link between this one that is historical but is also fictional in the real world, outside the story, right?
Yes. It's probably fictional. Yeah.
It is very good because Borges is linking the sect of the story, Orbis Tertius, that is fictional, with one sect of the real world that perhaps is fictional.
Yeah, right. It's a good choice.
And he says that that sect wanted to create a fake country. And later, the sect was persecuted, like forbidden, right? And they were disseminated for all around the world. And finally,
which fictionally also happened to the Rosicrucians. Fictionally.
Ah, great. And later in the United States, there is a research.
Resurgence is right. Yeah, resurgence.
Resurgence of the sect. And now they say that in the United States, it is not a good idea to try to create a fake country, but it is more interesting, more better to create a fake world, right?
Yeah.
So they start to create the Tlön word.
Tlön, Tlön, yeah.
Right. And they elaborate the complete encyclopedia of Tlön. It has like 40 tomes, and Borges says it is
I think the modern word is volumes. So tome is
volumes.
he uses the word, well, whoever translated it in English uses the word tome, and I'm assuming that he approved the translation if his English is that good.
Mm-hmm.
But tome is sort of like, it gives you the feeling of this ancient book that's this thick, right? It's not a common word.
Right.
So when they completed it, I think they used the word volume, if I remember correctly. But earlier, they used the word tome to give it a kind of mythological feeling, I think.
Right. Great observation. And then these complete volumes were at some time where this sect decided to present it to the entire society.
Right.
And the entire society started to know about this world and start to believe about the things that happened in this world. And later, they started to speak in the language of this world and to yes. So there is a sentence. He says,
the real world starts to become this quasi-fictional place, Tlön, and the real world begins to transform based on an idea.
Yes, and Borges says, the contact and the habit of Tlön have disintegrated this world.
Yeah, it's a very interesting choice of words, disintegrated. So, do you happen to know if he approved this translation himself?
I think he did.
Probably,
yes.
Yeah. If his English was very good. So, and also that part that you just mentioned there, that's the postscript of the story. So that's the thing that's supposed to happen after the main part, which is sort of like, oh, by the way. But the postscript happens in 1947, but this is written in 1940. So he's writing in his present about a fictional future in his real present. So one of the things that he's trying to do is he's trying to blend together in an almost uncomfortable way things that are real, as in we can talk about them, like, oh yeah, the Rosicrucians, but actually never existed, and things that are actually real, with things that are fictional from the beginning that we just found out about that are now becoming real, plus the present as real in many ways, but fictional in that some of the people are doing things that they didn't really do in the real world, plus a future that is totally fictional based on all of that stuff.
Exactly. And even that future
it's very weird.
And that future is like magical, because there start to some objects of Tlön start to appear in the real world.
Yeah.
Some magical, strange objects of Tlön.
Well, I think it's interesting that he mentions specifically Hermeticism. So he mentions the Hermetica, and the Hermetica they were not a group like the Rosicrucians, but the Hermetists basically were the founders of magic. And in Hermeticism, this idea, Hermetic, in Hermeticism, there's the idea that within the rules of the world, within the rules of nature, it is a language which can manipulate or change the world. you can't break the rules of nature, you can't break the rules of the universe, but you can, if you understand you understand the 7 principles of Hermeticism, then you can do magic, essentially. And this is the beginning of all the modern ideas about magic that we have. Spells and wands and all of the
Wow.
popular ideas, that come from Harry Potter. All of that stuff, including alchemy, all of that stuff goes back to Hermeticism. And it's interesting that he brings that up, because I think he's trying to suggest that whatever's happening with these magical appearances of things in Tlön, in the real world, is sort of like, actually these 2 worlds are kind of merging together. So it's not breaking the rules of the universe. It's just sort of 2 worlds merging because of language, something like that.
Yes, he also mentions this guy, Smerdis. Did you read that?
Yes.
Smerdis was a man that replaced a king of Persia, and no one noticed that. And when the real king of Persia came back from the war, nobody believed that he was the real one, and he suicided. He made suicide.
Can I make a small point about that? That's just weird. It's very weird that came up on this. So when I first read the story, the same day I had been reading the histories of Herodotus. Do you know Herodotus, the Greek historian? And Herodotus writes that story. He writes the story of the Magus who takes over the kingdom, replaces his brother Smerdis, and is the other one, because they have the same name, and then the story of how they overthrow the Magus the same day. Then I read this.
Amazing.
It's very weird, right?
Wow, great.
Yeah.
Yes, because I think that happened to you because Borges loved the history of literature and these amazing stories, and he put a lot of those things in the stories. And if you also love books and history, it will probably happen to you.
Yeah, well, it's just interesting that happens to be, because it's not a common story that a lot of people know. So it's just weird that I would find those on the same day. Very weird.
Yes, amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
that's a pretty good summary. I think you covered it well. Nice job.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And
we can get into some of the, I think, interesting topics that it brings up. Language, and some of the philosophy. But I'm just curious, as a story, why do you like it?
I think I like it because what I like about fiction is to being submerged.
Yeah, submerged.
Submerged into a fictional, magic, amazing world. And this happens to me when I read this story.
Yeah, I can see that. I just think the description of Tlön, this fictional world, that part was really interesting. Just that part by itself, I think if it had been written as an academic essay, as a nonfiction academic essay about even if it were presented, I think there would have been a more interesting way to play with what he wants to play with. He wants to play with this weird line between what's real and what's not as a way to introduce some of his thoughts about language.
This is how the story
philosophy
starts. Do you remember that he's talking with his friend about the idea to write some story with an unreliable narrator?
Yes.
Uh,
But I think I think it would have been even more interesting to be the unreliable narrator if he would have
he,
Of course he is. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, which is great. I appreciate that. I love that. He's not reliable. He's not trustworthy. But imagine if he had done that or written an essay that was not presented even as fiction. It's just written in a completely non-fiction style, with all of the detail that you would get in a philosophical work like Wittgenstein or something, and just presented like that, but still be the unreliable narrator, because
he
it's
did that.
I know, but
Borges did that.
I understand that, but in the fiction
Okay.
parts,
No.
I,
In other words.
okay. Well, I think that would have been a better way to do this, because I found the fictional part. I just didn't find it as it just kind of was a distraction almost from the real meat of the essay. Yeah, the mirror thing, that was an interesting. The introduction is interesting, but I just think if it had been written in a more nonfiction style, it would have been even more impactful.
Yes, but I've read those examples of Borges
Yeah.
that you didn't read that, but he made that, and I like much more this one than those.
Why?
I like those, but I like this one much more.
Why?
Because in this one I have like, for example, you like music.
Not really.
Right.
I don't
No,
really like music.
you don't like.
I rarely listen to it. Maybe that's why. Sorry to
Well,
say that to a musician.
well, but someone could like music. There's so much
Most
people like
humans
music.
like music, yes.
Most
My
humans.
clone number 2 likes music.
And someone perhaps like poetry. But when you have a song, the song is poetry plus music.
Very
And
true. That's
you
a good
like,
description of music.
Yes, perhaps you like songs more than just music or just poetry. You like this
I would say
synergy.
that's true. The synthesis combining two
Synthesis.
things. The synthesis of
Mhm.
poetry and instruments playing in a beautiful way is a song, a modern song. Yeah.
Yes. So I like essays and I like fiction and I like most of all Borges because it is the two things together, right?
That's interesting. I appreciate your opinion, but my view is pick one. Geez,
Yes. Also, there are musicians that think the same. Like music critics, they say, "Oh my God, why all the people like to listen to songs? Why don't they just listen to instrumental music?"
which is what I
And I
do.
think
So that's
yes,
probably
yes,
the reason why
it's good.
I didn't appreciate the fictional part as much as you,
Mhm.
because when I do listen to music, I usually only listen to music when I really need to focus on something and I need something to help me concentrate. So then I'll turn on one of those lo-fi live streams that just plays instrumental music that you don't really notice, but it does help you concentrate. I don't really listen to music to enjoy it.
Mhm.
I just
Yes, when they started to make when them started to make sounded films, movies,
yeah.
right? There were a lot of film
They called them
critics
back
that
then. They called them talkies. When
talkies,
they went
yes, the
from
talkies,
silent to in the 1920s or 1930s, I think they went from silent to spoken. They
yes,
went or
and
20s talkies.
some critics they thought, oh, this is terrible. This will make the cinema much worse, because now the people will not be watching the image, the movement of the image, and they will be distracted by the sounds and the music.
That's not what's happening here, Pablo. What's happening here is just personal preference, okay? I appreciate fiction. I can appreciate nonfiction essays. It's true that I read mostly nonfiction, but I can appreciate fiction. I just think in this case, these ideas would have been best presented in essay format, personal opinion. Just like I think I mentioned before we started Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World. Interesting
Mhm.
ideas, distracting novel. Very, 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 it's just clunky, not very well written. So he was better at writing essays. I don't know.
Yes, but Borges was better at writing stories
Okay.
than essays. He was very good writer. Maybe there are two obstacles. One is the language,
Maybe.
and the other is that it is complex. It requires perhaps two or more lectures to 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 be familiar and not overwhelmed, because there is so much information in the story.
Yes, that's right. That's right. There is a lot of information, and it's. Have you ever read or even looked at Finnegan's Wake? Have you heard
I,
of that?
I did look that, but
Okay,
I didn't read it.
that's probably one of the most unreadable pieces of fiction by James Joyce ever written.
Mhm.
If you just look at a sentence of that, you have to stop and go back and look at it again, right? So
Mhm.
creatively, I appreciate it, but I don't want to read Finnegan's Wake because I think good fiction flows. So if you want to present complex ideas, then James Joyce also wrote some really great fiction, right? Like The Dubliners is really good, but because it flows very naturally. Finnegan's Wake was like his crazy science project where he wanted
Mhm.
to just make it as it's unreadable. I'm not saying that this is unreadable. I'm just saying that I didn't think it flowed very well, and so I didn't enjoy the reading experience. When I
Mhm.
want to read really complicated, dense things, I want to read it as nonfiction. I love to read nonfiction, especially if it's very complicated and dense, because I feel like I'm studying this. And if I
Mhm.
read fiction, I want it to be this sort of walk through the forest where it just feels nice. And this is kind of an awkward middle thing where I don't know what mode I should be in. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, of course. I think the good thing about Borges versus James Joyce is that Borges decided to write only short stories.
Yeah.
So if you need to read it several times, you don't waste so much time like reading several times the Ulysses, right?
Well, not Ulysses,
And
Finnegan's Wake
that is
is
great because you can read it. Oh, yes, but Ulysses is longer.
Oh yes, very true. Very true.
And
Can
difficult too, very difficult too.
I'm just can I just share a couple of quotes from Finnegan's Wake?
Yes, of course.
Hmm. Okay, let me see here. Okay, can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. So we've got a sound here that is not a common sort of sound, onomatopoeia, not a known one. He's kind of making up a lot of stuff. So soft this morning hours, yes, carry me along, Taddy, like you done through the toy fair. If I seen him bearing down on me now under white spread wings like he'd come from archangels, that part is easy to understand. I sink I die down over his feet, humbly dumbly, only to wash up. So first of all, that's a made up word, wash up. And it's unclear if it, what that means. Humbly dumbly sounds like another onomatopoeia that I think he's making up. So we have to think about like what he's trying to suggest with that. So just to read these several sentences, it's a lot of work to think about all of this, right? It's very hard. It's very hard reading. It's not easy. I don't even know what this is, but I have no idea what that is. I don't know what this whole thing here. I have no idea what this is. This whole thing makes
In Irish, do you think to being Irish and contemporary to Joyce was easily to understand this?
I don't think, because I know that he was inventing a lot of things. You know how Shakespeare,
About that book, he didn't read.
he never read. That's an interesting idea. Do you think that was a lie? Was he lying about that?
But because he said no, I don't know, but he said that no one could make it because it's so boring.
Yeah, I actually haven't read all of Ulysses either, but I think I had to read some of it in college. When I was in college, we had to read some, but I don't think
Yes,
I don't.
I
That has
also
to be
read
untrue.
some parts. I
If he's
think
going to lecture on it, though, it has to be somewhat true, right? I mean, yeah.
he was like an expert on James Joyce, but he said he didn't read it completely. It's very funny.
Did he read Finnegan's Wake?
Yes, yes, he did like a lot that one.
That one would be good to do. Maybe take some mushrooms and then read Finnegan's Wake, and then you could maybe understand it a little better.
Totally, yes. Let me say something about the story.
Yeah, let's get
The
back to it.
link, the reference to the Nazis, right? Borges says in the at the end of the story and the postscript, when the world is um, being transformed to Tlön.
Transformed.
How
Yeah,
can I say that?
transformed.
Transformed.
The world is being
Yes,
transformed
yes.
into
He
Tlön.
says, right. So Borges says it was he wrote this during World War II, right? And he says, 10 years ago, any symmetry with a semblance of order like dialectical materialism, anti-Semitism, or Nazism was sufficient to
Nazism.
entrance the minds of men. Nazism, okay, was sufficient to entrance the minds of men. How could one do other than submit to Tlön, to the minute and vast evidence of an orderly planet? I really like that part. He's saying like he's saying two things that are like contradictory, but they are not. He's saying people want symmetry. People want to know to think that reality is closed, right?
Yeah.
And he's also saying that people want reality to be like not logic,
No, yeah.
because this world of Tlön is not logical.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, what would be more convincing to conquer the world than one religion, like a religion that is not logical and very closed, like symmetrical.
And to him, he was talking about the Nazis?
Yes, he was Nazis and like Stalin. He was talking
I
about Stalin.
I thought he was
Stalinism.
talking about I thought he was talking about communism.
Yes, yes, more like Stalinism, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, okay, yeah. What? Yes, Marxism during the 20th century. But we couldn't say just Stalinism.
No, because you have Trotskyism, right?
I know.
That is more like open. It's more open than Stalinism.
Yes, but if you just say Stalinism, then you leave out China, which was not so open.
Oh yes, but it was like before the Maoist revolution, right?
Maoist revolution was in the 1930s, I believe, or early 40s.
I think later.
No,
But I don't know. I really don't know. Okay. It's not so important. Yes, communism, because Borges was conservative.
Yes, I see what you mean. There's a sort of a desire to have something explained and have an idea system that makes the world make perfect sense, but also at the same time to have a feeling that there is something that isn't explained in your life that makes your life feel more meaningful still somehow.
Yes. I think, for example, now people around me, they are more and more believing in astrology.
I noticed that.
Yes, and I feel like Borges because he, at the end, when all the world is becoming Tlön, he says, I don't care, I will translate this story. Do you remember that? This is the end of the story.
That's like throwing up his hands in a way. Why do you think more and more people, because I've noticed the same thing, I've noticed more and more often when I go out to eat, I'll hear people behind me talking about astrology, and it's usually people who I would describe as young kids, like 20s, early 20s, talking about it. I think it's a common phenomena. What do you think is going on?
I think it is related to identity.
Mhm.
We live in a time where the traditional identities are in discussion, like gender identity, nationality identity,
Yeah.
ethnic or race identity. So people need an essential identity. They need to think, I was born with this identity. I can't choose this identity. And in astrology, you can't choose what is your sign.
Sign. Yes, your
You
sign.
can't choose your sign. So now you can choose your nationality, you can choose your gender, but you can't choose your sign. So it is good to know there is something in your identity you can't choose.
But with astrology, also, there's a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of astrology is based on interpretation. So you based on the circumstances and what your sign is telling you, you can interpret that for your life uniquely as you feel it makes sense. So the interesting thing about astrology is you can get the solid ground under your feet of having this is my sign. You
Mhm.
can't if you decide I'm not this sign, I'm going to change, then the whole system is destroyed. You can't do that. So it's I agree with you there. But then you still get to have this process of what does this mean and what does that mean, which is also what people need because people don't want to wake up every day and have every moment planned out in front of them. They also, at the same time, need problems to work through and a feeling of uncertainty. I think people need a balance of a feeling of stability with maybe their identity and a feeling of uncertainty with a sort of sense of what does the future hold? If I interpret this correctly, that could be good for me. A feeling of controlling their destiny, even though they have a set sign.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's really interesting. I don't really get into astrology myself, but I think it's really interesting.
I think you are losing a lot of viewers now in this in this moment. No,
Why?
no, no. Just joking. No, because now I think people that is very fanatic,
Oh, okay. Well, the
fans of
fanatics. I
astrology.
don't need to keep fanatic. They can leave. That's great. Uh,
No, yes,
I'm just
but
kidding.
they don't want people to disbelieve uh, about astrology.
Actually, I do believe it, but not in the way that most people do.
Hmm.
I believe astrology in the Carl Jung sense. Do you
Hmm.
know what that is?
Yes, yes,
So
yes, yes.
Carl Jung believed that astrology is like a giant clock that measures periods of thousands of years. And so and there is a world inside that will respond to different symbols outside. And at different times, the feelings that people have inside they'll shift, and so some symbols will make people focus on them more. So for example, when we went from what came before the age of Pisces, which one was before Pisces? So
I don't know.
we're going out of Pisces, which is a several thousand year period, from Pisces into Aquarius. That's what we're going into. So Carl Jung said in the age of Pisces, there's something about that symbol, the fish, the two fish, which matches the inside feelings that people have. He called the collective unconscious. And so for him, especially for uh, Europeans, Jesus Christ was the perfect symbol that people needed at that time.
Mm.
And he thought that because the symbol of Christianity, of Jesus, is a fish. And so he thought that was very important, that there was stuff going on inside people that they were not aware of, that grabbed onto the symbol of the fish. And that's why Christianity became the number one religion in the world. But now we're moving out of the symbol of the fish into another one. So we're kind of between two right now. And so we're looking for another symbol that's going to match Aquarius that people will respond to. So there's nothing magical going on. It's just people's inside feelings. They're unconscious, and we're just responding to symbols that make sense to us at that time in history, which is pretty cool.
Yes, it's cool, and I think he's not contradicting physics, because I think the problem with popular astrology is that it contradicts physics, because they say when you are born, the exact place where the planet is and the stars are defining your life. That makes
Really?
no sense for physics.
Well, but that would be like there's a laser beam behind that exact position of the planets and the stars, shooting through the planets and the stars and hitting you in the head when you're born. But I don't think that's what astrology is saying. I think astrology is more like it's not a cause. It's just a unique pattern that represents something about you. So it's more like, what time was it when you were born? It was 12:05. Okay, that's what time you were born. What time exactly? 12:05, October 31st, 1988. Okay, that's what time it was when you were born. Where were the stars and planets where you were born? Okay, they're there, and there. That's you. Okay, that's you. So it's not causing anything for you. It's just it's like a big clock telling you something about, I think.
Okay. Yes, that is much better interpretation.
That's how I make sense of it. And again, I'm not really into it, but if I were going to be into it, I think that's how I would want to understand it.
Yes, I like that. Yes, I would like if every people that is into astrology think it the same as you.
Because otherwise, it makes no sense. How could because there's one planet that's a few 100,000 miles away, or a few million miles away, and then a star behind it that's 2,000 light years away. How could those two have any physical effect on you?
Yes, it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. I agree with that. Okay, well, I want to. Can we talk about two things in the story?
Yes, of course.
You have time?
Yes.
One is language, and the other is Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
So, I thought it would be good to just do a quick sort of review of Berkeley, and so that everybody knows who that is, basically, and then we can talk about what Borges is saying. Okay.
Mm-hmm. He says that Berkeley was one of the founders of Orbis Tertium sect.
Yes. Let's just do. This is just a very sort of 1 minute 50-second recap of who he is. Can you hear this?
Houses, mountains, rivers, trees, they're all out there even though no one's there to see them, right? Possibly. But according to George Berkeley, if they are still there when we're not looking, it's not for the reason that most of us think it is. Bishop Berkeley argued for immaterialism, the view that there is no such thing as matter. All that exists in the world are our ideas and perceiving minds. This sounds absurd, but it's a subtler view than Dr. Johnson thought, when, learning of Berkeley's position, he kicked a stone and declared, "I refute him thus." Berkeley would have expected Johnson's toe to connect with the stone and to hurt, but his point was that what we call matter is really just actual and possible sensory experience, including the experience of stubbing your toe. There are lots of ways you can experience a stone. See it, smell it, touch it, kick it. But Berkeley didn't think that there was a material object lurking beyond the sensory properties causing them. The stone just was the experience. To be is to be perceived, or, in Latin, esse percipi. What about that tree falling in a forest with no one to see it or hear it? That's not perceived, so does it exist? Well, Berkeley thought the tree does really fall, and not just because there will probably be insects and birds around perceiving it. A deeply religious man, he thought that God perceives everything. So everything continues to exist when nobody's looking because God always has his eye on it.
Berkeley, you had me right up until the very end. I think it's a pretty good overview.
Yes, and I think it's very interesting because for the Tlön inhabitants, the only important thing about metaphysics or philosophy is to be astounding or amazing. And this one is amazing. I really like this idea, but I don't think it is practical. But I really like anyway.
The problem is that there's no way to disagree with it, because you can just say, yeah, that might be true. I think it was I believe it was Kant who criticized Berkeley's idea that basically, or no, I think it might have been Hume.
Hume, yes, Borges quotes Hume.
Yes.
In the story, Borges says, I open the quote. Hume noted for all time that Berkeley's arguments did not admit the slightest refutation, nor did they cause the slightest conviction.
Right, which means that you can't come up with a reason to say that can't possibly be true, but you also don't feel that it is true.
Yes.
But I think it might be. But the point is interesting. I think I can't remember if it might have been Hume that said, if you see some action that leads to another thing happening, a cause and effect, and it happens every single time, there's no way to know that that's actually a cause and effect. Like if I push a cup off of a table and the cup falls on the ground and breaks, and it happens every single time that I do that, that's still no proof that actually it is my hand is the cause of the thing falling off the table. It could just be like notes on a page where one note follows the next and it follows the next, and one thing always just follows another, but actually it's not the cause of the other. It's just every time it's a sequence. Every time hand thing does this, cup does this. It's not a cause and effect. It's just a sequence, a thing that happens after another thing. So that's interesting.
Yes, let me quote another excerpt of the story. Borges says that for the people of Tlön, the perception of a cloud of smoke on the horizon, and then of the burning field, and then of the half-extinguished cigarette that produced the blaze, is considered an example of association of ideas.
Yeah. So you have to get rid of the idea of that cause and effect are real. Is the other example that he gives is the coins that are dropped on the ground, the nine coins dropped on the ground. and that each time one is found, because they're found in different places, that their individual experiences of finding coins, but the space between doesn't matter, and they're not necessarily. We can't necessarily say, okay, the coins have been there the whole time.
Yes, that's one of the examples of the explanation of some philosophers of Tlön trying to explain the materialistic metaphysic, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But he fails to convince the people of Tlön.
Yeah. So I mean, what do you think Borges is? You said he's fairly conservative. What is Borges trying to explain with these different examples about mentioning Berkeley and the example with the coins, about the world being a world of ideas, and a world that is real, that is physical.
I think he's writing this in a moment where he's misanthropic, because he thinks humanity is irrational, and this is horrible. So there are two. It's like a paradox, because he really loved this kind of metaphysics, like the people of Tlön, because I think he really thought that a good philosophy is a philosophy that is marvelous, right?
Yeah, it's nice to hear. It's fun.
But at the same time, the philosophies that are not objective or materialistic or rational, he thinks this is dangerous.
Right, but not because it's true, but just because it can lead to maybe ways of thinking that.
Yes, because you can say, no, I am not torturing you. This is an idea I have that
Right.
I am torturing you.
Right. Well, that's what happened in the 20th century. For example, people often quote what the Nazis did, right? But that movement started earlier. There was a movement even in the United States where science allowed people to say things like, you shouldn't have children because your DNA is, you shouldn't have another generation. So people were forced to be sterilized. In the United States, people were forced to be sterilized if they didn't meet certain requirements. It's the same thing. People, I wonder if he's saying that maybe also about science, because at that time, science was being used to create very, it was real science, but it was being used to imagine horrible, irrational, illogical worldviews.
Yes, there is. I think there is not contemporary this idea, but there is an idea that the Nazis, this systematic plan, thanks to rationality, right?
Yes.
To rational thinking, they made this systematic plan of killings the Jewish people. And Borges says something about that. He says, I quote, he says that it is conjectured that this brave new world is the work of a secret society of astronomers, biologists, engineers, metaphysicians, poets, chemists, algebraists, moralists, painters, geometers, directed by an obscure man of genius. Individuals mastering these diverse disciplines are abundant, but not so those capable of inventiveness, and less so those capable of subordinating that inventiveness to a rigorous and systematic plan. So I think it is interesting to link with the Nazis phenomenon.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the 20th century was really a weird one, because there was so much stuff that was new ideas, science that had never been, unbelievable advances in science, and then people who had their own ideas about what they wanted to achieve in the world, not related to science, right? Let's say Hitler, and then using the system of science as a way to carry it out, but the reason for it has nothing to do with science. That's just like the tool that was used. It was a useful tool to do lots of terrible things. Illogical use of logical systems.
Let me quote another excerpt. Borges says about Tlön, he says, from which it can be deduced that there are no sciences on Tlön, not even reasoning. The paradoxical truth is that they do exist, and in almost uncountable number.
Yeah. Didn't he say that about nouns?
No, it is about science, but he also says something similar about
I thought he
nouns.
said that about nouns. Yeah, that because there are no nouns, therefore there are an unlimited number of nouns.
Yes, that also is in another part, but it is.
Yeah. Well, that's the part that's most interesting to me, the language of Tlön. So
I remember to be the my favorite part the first time I read it.
Yes.
Long time ago.
Maybe because I'm a language teacher, so I find that part especially interesting. Just as a fun object to play with, to not have nouns and have to describe everything using adjectives is an interesting idea, and also to have to describe all things as verbs is also interesting as actions. And also, I feel like he's there maybe thinking about Wittgenstein. Are you familiar with him?
Yes, Borges names Wittgenstein.
Wittgenstein. Yeah.
A lot of times in his essays and stories.
Okay, well, that makes sense then, because I think he's trying to do with language is say, I think most people think of language, the language that they use, as a nice little tool to get things done in the world, maybe ask other people to do stuff, make money. It's nice, it's handy. But if you didn't have it, it's just a tool. It's like losing your knife or something. But I think that he's suggesting, like Wittgenstein, that language is a little more than a tool, and it might actually shape the brain, the way that we think about things. Like, for example, if you have if I have the word hoodie, that you're wearing a hoodie right now. If I have that word in my vocabulary, I know the word hoodie. If my grandma, who maybe doesn't know that word, looks around in her vocabulary, she's going to pull out a word like sweatshirt, which is less specific, because a sweatshirt could have a hood or not a hood or a zipper. Hoodie is a very specific thing. It's got a hood, it's got these string things, it's got a pocket in the front. That's a hoodie. And so actually, it's not just that maybe she can't communicate that as well as me, because I'm just using that as an example. It's that her map of the world inside is also a little smaller. So the kinds of words that you know and the grammar of your language is what shapes your brain. Well, not your brain, what shapes the way that you understand the world. And so even when you describe how you feel, you're limited by the same thing. Like if you say, if you feel pain, for example, what are you feeling? And if you say to yourself, I'm in pain, that pain is also shaped by your idea of the word pain and the words that you have to describe it, even for yourself. And Wittgenstein called that your beetle in the box. The beetle in the box is you have a little box with a little bug inside, and you can never show anyone else your beetle in the box. It's not possible. But you can talk about it. And when you talk about it, you participate in this game that everyone else is playing. And some games are very small, like two best friends talking about something. They're able to communicate really, really well because they have their own understanding of each other, a private, small little language game. And other people might not understand what they're saying sometimes. And then you might have a game that's like English in the United States, but it's less, you're very, the broader you go, the less you're able to express really, really clearly. And the smaller you go, the more you can lock into the other person, but you can never show them what's in your box. And you might not even be able to see what's in your own box. Maybe. You know, you might not even be able to look in your own box.
Yes, you made me think about this concept. I read it that in history there were different names for different emotions typical of that time, and when that word for that emotion is lost, even perhaps that exact emotion is not felt anymore.
Yes, I think that might be. It's also interesting, for example, with colors. I don't remember where I read this, but there in some cultures there are more words for colors where that type of color is more abundant. So
Yes.
yeah, so for example, different names for the color blue, where
Blue.
when someone lives by this, like a tribe lives by the sea, there are many words associated with the word blue, what we would generally call blue, and that means there are more colors in a way.
And there is something more amazing regarding blue. Ancient cultures did not have a word for blue.
Yeah.
Blue was like some color like green, and the more advanced cultures started to name that specific color blue. So in like Homer poems of ancient Greece, there is no color like blue. And when they describe the sky, they say the sky is like a sunrise has the color of wine in the sky, and the sea is green, and they can't see the color blue. It's
Right.
amazing.
So even inside your head, your thoughts are being limited by the language that you know. Your
Yes,
your
and
little map of the world. And I think I also remember reading something that in those cultures where they start naming things more, there's a specific order where some things are named earlier than others. And I can't remember exactly what the order was, but I believe red came before blue. And I think the
yes.
reason that red comes before blue is that you have the experience of blood, and you need to
Mhm.
describe blood in some situations because it's life or death, whereas the difference between blue and green is often not a life or death situation. So red has to be named before blue and
Yes.
green. That's all just kind of like nature colors. Who cares about that? Red represents food. Red represents something leaking out of my body, right? It's a scary thing. So you need red first.
Yes, and blue is very uncommon in nature. It's only in the sky. And when you see that the sea is blue, it's because it is reflecting the color of the sky. So the only thing blue is the sky. You don't need to name it.
Right. Yeah. It's pretty fascinating. And as an English teacher, I'm really interested in that part of it because I see uh, I see people who I see that language ability is not really about um, the ability to use language well is not so much about limitations of words known. It's about um, a desire to maybe understand and express something um,
Mm.
in whatever way that you can. And so if that sometimes that means putting together several adjectives to say that thing that could be said by a noun, but you don't know the noun, but that's okay
Mm.
because you know these
Yeah.
three adjectives that can get the idea across kind of. And
Mhm.
if that's this idea of the people of Tlön only using verbs to express things, if you're limited and you can't use nouns, then it comes down to your desire to make other people understand you. And that's I think what good language use is that feeling of I want other people to understand me. I don't care how it has to happen. But then
That's
it's a
nice.
matter of choosing the right things and getting into the adjectives feel different than the nouns, and I understand different nouns differently. It's a really interesting sort of messy process, but it's fascinating.
Yes, but it's interesting what you said before that perhaps with some language you can't achieve some specific ideas, right?
I think there
Some.
was there was a story. I don't remember where I heard this story. I'm forgetting all of the things, the places where I hear things now. But when ships first started coming over from Europe
Mm.
to the New World,
Mhm.
uh, it wasn't as though the people who saw the ships arriving on the horizon said, "Look, boats. But what are those boats over there?" They said, "What's wrong with the ocean?" Because it was a totally new thing. They didn't associate the small boats that they had with these huge things with big sails. And so
Mm.
they didn't have any language in place to express that thing that's happening. So instead of those being boats, there's something weird going on with the ocean today. like there's clouds on the ocean, or there's a lightning storm, or something is there. But if you don't have anything to describe it, you just do your best. But maybe in that case, your best is not very accurate. It's not very
Yes.
precise. And that's the exercise of getting better at English is an exercise of getting closer to being very precise with language. When people hear you speak, they say, I got it immediately, and they don't have to think. Because if you say there's something wrong with the ocean, I still don't know what you mean by that. You have to say more. Okay, there's something
Yes.
white. Yeah, you need more language to express that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. And let me quote another
I like how you keep
sentence.
bringing it back to the text. That's great. For those
Because
just joining, we are talking about the Borges story called Tlön, Uqbar, Orbis, Tertius, and it's not a super easy read in English if it's your second language. Pablo has read it in both Spanish, which is the original, and English, and so we're just kind of talking through some of the interesting ideas. A very different type of live stream today compared to what we usually do, but I appreciate it. I like it.
so Borges, when he's talking about this philosopher of Tlön that is trying to express the metaphysics of materialism, Borges says
Materialism
language-
being the materialism being that rocks are real things. It's a simple way to say it.
yes. So Borges says the language of Tlön resists the formulation of this paradox. Most people did not even understand it, and I think the word paradox there is like a humor, because the idea of materialism here is not a paradox. The paradox is idealism of Berkeley.
Yeah.
But he's saying what you said, that language resists the formulation. It's impossible to really explain materialism in the language of Tlön.
If you say, well, it's all just language. So even if you say materialism, just to be clear, materialism means is saying that the world outside of you is really there. That when you bang your head against the wall, that wall is really there. It's a wall, and if you didn't exist, that wall would still be a wall. And if another person banged their head against that wall, they would have the same experience because the wall is out there, and it's real. It's all our intuition about the world and how it is and what's real is real. and idealism is the opposite of that. Is probably maybe not. How do you know? You could be dreaming that you're hitting your head against the wall, and how would that be different from you really hitting your head against the wall? And you could be plugged into the matrix. And if you're plugged into the matrix and you hit your head against the wall, it would be real in your head, but your real physical body is sitting in a pod filled with pink goo. That's what's really happening. So that's the difference. That's kind of the difference between them. Maybe it's too simplified. But I think the interesting thing about that is that no matter which one, it's still just a language game. Because if you say materialism explains the world better, I agree. If you say when a ball rolls down a hill, it stops eventually because, and then you give an explanation of that with inertia and friction and all of that, that explains it really well. But all of those are just ideas that happen to match what happens better. And if you do the example with the coins that drop, and you say someone dropped 9 coins, and then several days later someone finds them, and you say they're 2 separate experiences and there's no connection between them, and I don't even know if the coins existed in the 3 days between them being lost and being found, that doesn't match the reality very well. It doesn't give us a satisfying feeling of saying, I understand this. But if we say the coins were dropped, they were there the whole time, someone found them later, and they're the same coins, and we feel satisfied by it. So maybe that's the explanation that feels, because it's feels best, and that's why it's best, not because it's actually true. We still don't know if we're in the Matrix or if we're dreaming. In fact, we really, you can't prove it. The only thing that matters is when we hear about the explanation of the ball stopping at the bottom of the hill, we say, yeah, okay, I like that. That works for me. That matches with my feeling of how the world works. Next, what else do we have? What's for dinner? We can move on with life. But it's still just some ideas. Just happens to match experience better.
Yes, and what if you try to explain that the golden coining events were the same?
What do you
right?
mean?
You have not the noun coin. You only
right.
you can only name it like the golden coining event.
Right. So first you need enough language to explain the situation, and that language, it's better if it includes nouns and verbs and adjectives
For
and
materialism,
prepositions.
it is needed.
Yes, you need it, because if you just have verbs and you're walking around saying, I'm doing the, and you can't ever arrive at a thing, then the way that our brains process the world, it doesn't match. There's no lock and key fit. So we need those things for when you make noises, for me to say, I see what you mean. I understand what you mean. I get it. But that still doesn't make it true. Like
Yes.
Barclay's thing, you can't say that that's not true. It's just that if it were true, I mean, who cares? It doesn't match my experience. So it doesn't matter if it's true or not. The thing that matters is I can function in the world.
Exactly.
That's the only thing.
If you live here, like a Tlönian or like a Berkeley, really believer of Berkeley
I think I
idealism,
pronounced
you
it
are like
Berkeley
a
before, but I
psychotic.
think it's pronounced Barclay instead of Berkeley. I think
Barclay,
it's Barclay.
okay.
Yeah.
You are like a psychotic if you live
Yes.
that way.
Well, there was a guy in ancient Rome named Pyrrho, and he was one of the very first skeptics. And the skeptics went around doubting everything. And apparently he denied everything. He denied the world. He would walk off of cliffs and injure himself. He would walk into the street, and his friends would have to stop him from getting run over by horses. He burned himself many times in fire. So he believed it so much that he could just deny the world, that he was willing to take action. But his action didn't match with how the world is, how we usually understand the world, how we usually explain the world. And how we usually explain the world is that when one thing hits another thing, there's a something bad could happen if it's going fast enough.
He was more radical even than Diogenes.
Well, Dionysius.
Dionysus. No. The cynic. Diogenes. Diogenes.
Yes. Diogenes.
that
Diogenes.
Diogenes. Yes.
But Diogenes didn't reject the world, though. He just rejected society. He lived in a
Yes.
tub, right? And he's the guy
Yes.
who
Yes.
said Alexander the Great came to see him, and he said, "You're blocking my son," or something.
Yes.
Move out of the way. You're blocking my son. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Rejecting the society. Good point.
Yeah. The skeptics. This is just from memory. The skeptics rejected any truth claim. Like if you could say apples fall down, I think skeptics, old school skeptics, not modern skeptics, just they doubt like religion and astrology and stuff.
Yes.
Old skeptics, Rome skeptics, I think they rejected anything that you could say,
Yes.
any truth claim.
Yes, because
And the cynics just hated any social thing that you could say.
They wanted to achieve some like a mental state of peace of mind. It was like a method.
Yes. They were like the guys. They were like the sadhus in India. Those guys who have dreadlocks and are naked beside the road.
Okay.
Gotta go to Indians. They're there. They're there all the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
And about skeptical, there is a reference in the story also, because Borges says that in Tlön, every book of metaphysics should have the contrary thesis. If it hasn't, it is not complete. So if you write a book about your idea, you must explain perfectly the opposite idea.
Yeah, that's interesting. Nobody does that.
Now you need to explain why Borges is a good fictional story writer.
But that's only if I believe in what he said. So since I don't believe that he's a fictional story writer, then I don't need to agree with his argument that we should explain both sides. So therefore, I don't have to do that.
Okay.
I reject your paradigm.
Okay. Let me say something more about this story. It was written at the 1940s. Now we have a lot of movies and books of different layers or levels of reality, right? But
Yeah.
that's what not so common at that time.
What do you mean by levels of reality?
This book. You don't know what is real and what not at different levels, because they are reference to people that existed, but they didn't do that. You don't know what is fictional and what not. Even in the story, there is the real Borges telling the story. The narrator is Borges, but it is not the real Borges, because the real Borges didn't live in a world where the earth became Tlön, right?
Right.
And a lot of other.
But also, didn't the real
examples
Borges was writing for the future also? So it could have become true.
Yes, it couldn't.
Because he didn't know at the time, because he was writing in 1940 about 1947, right?
Yes,
That's like if I were to say,
yes.
if I were to write a story about my future self. He didn't, of course, think that, but it's kind of fuzzy.
Yes, he wrote when he was young. He wrote a story of he encountering an old Borges and having a conversation. And then when he was old, he wrote another story of the old Borges encountering with the young Borges and having a conversation. It is fun to read the different perspectives.
I think there was a guy on YouTube who did that too. He did half of a dialogue when he was in his early teens, and then when he had he had an imaginary conversation, sort of like how now we have the split screen going on. He said, "Oh, really?" Oh, okay. He was reacting to things his older self was saying, and then his older self made a video maybe 10 years later, and completed the conversation. Yeah.
That's great. Good idea.
It is a
And
good idea.
another thing I want to say is that Tolkien and Borges was almost contemporaries. And while
J.R.R. Tolkien, for people who
Tolkien
don't know, that's
decided,
the author of The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Silmarillion, all of those books.
yes, while Tolkien decided to create this entire world in a lot of pages and a lot of books, I think Borges decided to let it in the imagination. Borges said there is these people that did this thing, and you can imagine how is the rest of this world. I like that.
See, I think for me, I get a sense of the uncanny valley. Do you know the uncanny valley? Have you heard that?
Yes. Yes.
The uncanny valley is, for example, you make a chat bot or something, or maybe actually, here's a good example of the uncanny valley. The trailer for the first Sonic the Hedgehog movie. Everyone thought it was insane and weird because he had human teeth. But he was this blue little monster guy, but they gave him very realistic teeth and eyes. So he had human-sized eyes and teeth, but he was Sonic the Hedgehog, an animated character. And everyone thought that was really strange because it's getting too close to reality, but it's not reality, and so it gives us this uncomfortable feeling. So they had to redo all of it. They made his eyes huge and cartoony. They made his mouth huge and cartoony. And so that the movie did much better as a result of making those changes. If I prefer, I generally prefer my fantasy fiction to be labeled fantasy fiction. Middle Earth is fictional, and all of the elves and everything, I'm able to live in that world comfortably, knowing it's all fiction. It's like a category in my mind. And if something is kind of moving back and forth between them, I just want to say, just let me know which one it is so that I can focus on, what you want to say, so that I don't have to think about this go back and forth all the time. And I think that's what you like about Borges, and that's what I like less about Borges.
Yes, and I like that Tlön is fictional. And now that I have 33 years old, I
we're the same age?
The fictional world of Tlön. Oh, great. I prefer the fictional world of Tlön instead of the fictional world of middle-aged, because
Middle Earth.
it bores me now to
Okay. So basically what you're saying is like I'm just trying to make a good example. You're saying like I want to use drugs as an example. You had some just normal stuff here, but then you need it constantly have to take more and more and more and more extreme stuff to feel anything. You're saying fiction is good for kids.
Yes, and I
right?
like
And you
this
need
thing.
that.
I
Yeah.
don't know how is I don't know how is philosophy of Gandalf or philosophy of hobbits. Tolkien didn't give me that,
Yeah,
but
that's
I
true.
know how is philosophy of Tlön, and I like that. And
Philosophy of
even
Gandalf.
of human history, I like to know the philosophy of human history. And now I'm not interested on the details of the battles of human history. So, of a fictional world, I also want to know the philosophy and not the history of the battles.
That's fair. I mean, I respect that. I respect it. I'm not disagreeing with you. I think I just, in terms of style, maybe we have
Even Borges, excuse me, even we have delay.
Yeah,
That's
there's a bit of
because
delay.
I'm interrupting you. Excuse me.
It's
But
very rude.
I want to say that Borges even says that when the complete encyclopedia of Tlön appears in Earth, there are several magazines, the zoology of Tlön,
Mhm.
zoology,
Zoology.
right? But,
Yeah.
he says zoology. But Borges says, I'm not interested in details of zoology. I will
Yeah.
explain philosophy.
Right. So he's not interested in a fictional
If he
thing.
were Tolkien, he were talking about zoology of Tlön.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yes, it is fictional.
He's
But no, I will concede something to you. There is a failure there. I must accept. The philosophies of Tlön are not unique of Tlön, but the zoology of Middle Earth are unique of Middle Earth.
right. With something like a
It will be
fictional.
interesting if Tlön would have some philosophy that is not here in the history of our culture.
Well, I think they're trying to do two very different things. J.R.R. Tolkien wants to create a complete world that you can sink into like a warm bath and enjoy. And once you can do that, you get into the stories, you care about the characters. When I was in my late teens, I was really into that world. I felt that world. It was real to me. And it gives a sense of uh, joy and meaning to life. And if that's the goal, that's great. That's like music. Music makes you feel good. I'm happy that you like music. Makes you feel good, so you listen to it. That's what it's for. But Borges is not trying to make people feel good. Borges is trying to pull. He's trying to. He's. It's like a project that he has where he wants to say things about the real world, maybe about the politics happening in the middle of the 20th century. And as a way to do that, he is creating some fictional things that allow us to not immediately think, oh, that's Nazis, or oh, that's Stalinism, and to instead
Yes,
look at it in a different point of
but
view. So you
here
have to
are
separate
Tolkien.
from the world a little bit.
Here are Tolkien. Excuse me. Look, here are Tolkien. He was wanting also to make an allegory of Christianity,
I know that. Yes, that's true. Yes.
and there is a lot of moralism in his
But that
work.
wasn't his primary project. I think he was, yes, he was trying to do that. Tolkien had his philosophy. But I think Borges wants to bring it a little closer to the real world, but add a little bit of fiction in so that you're able to be a little more objective. You can be a bit more objective when you see something as fiction or sarcastic or uh, uh, you can connect that fiction to the real world. Whereas with Tolkien, you get the main themes and the messages that might be related to Christianity, but primarily you're getting that unconsciously. You're not even really thinking about that part of it because you're enjoying the story.
Yes, but I think Borges wants the reader to feel fantasy. I really think that, and that sensation of magic and fantasy I felt when I was a child and I read Tolkien. Now I feel that exact the same sensation, that feeling when I read Borges, and I can't no longer feel that uh, that feeling, that I'm amazed. I can't be amazed anymore by the fantasy of Tolkien, but yes, I can be amazed by the fantasy of Borges.
I think I can't be amazed by the fantasy of anything.
No,
Yeah, I don't think so.
that's so sad.
It is very sad. All of the magic is gone for me.
Give it a chance to Borges.
Okay.
Perhaps you can feel it again.
You want to quickly watch something? I don't know if you have
Yes.
time, but I found the beetle in a box thing.
That series of videos are very good.
They are good. I just found them today, and they have a lot of different ones.
Imagine a group of people, each with a box. In everyone's box is a thing they call a beetle. But no one is ever allowed to look in anyone else's box. They can only look into their own. However, they can talk meaningfully about beetles even though they don't know what others have in their boxes, or indeed, if there's anything in them at all. The thing in each person's box is irrelevant to the shared public meaning of beetle. Its meaning is determined by the use people make of the term, not the private something hidden away from view. Whatever is or isn't in each person's box is irrelevant. It cancels out. Many of us think of our experiences as private, hidden away inside us. You can never enter my mind and find out whether your colour experiences are like mine, for example, or whether our pain experiences are the same. You can't see the beetle in my box, nor I the one in yours. Ludwig Wittgenstein used the beetle in the box analogy to suggest that the meaning of sensation words such as pain isn't given by referring to some private, inner, introspected something, a sensation to which you alone have access. In his view, there can't be more to the public meaning of our language than we are capable of teaching each other. And the private something, the beetle, can't have a role in that teaching because we can't get at it.
Great.
Yeah. But I think ultimately
I want that board game.
Did you ever play that game as a kid?
No.
Oh, it's a good
But-
game.
but
It's called Operation.
This one looks like a good board game. Board of the board game.
It's a classic. I played it. I played it all the time when I was a kid. It's called Operation.
Wow.
And if you touch the edge with the tweezers, you lose. You have to be very, very careful. Yeah.
I think I watched it in a TV commercial.
Operation.
But I didn't have it. Yes.
It's interesting here that he says Tractatus Logico Philosophicus. That's his first book, but actually it's his second book, Philosophical Investigations, where he really talks about the beetle in the box. The Tractatus is his first book, and he completely disagrees with himself from his first book to his second book. They're almost totally different. In his second book, that's why it's confusing that this is Tractatus, because he doesn't really focus on this part, the shared meaning, the public. This video calls it the public meaning. He calls it a language game. The language game that we play when I say ow and you say ow, and we can never know if we mean the same thing when we say ow, but that's because we don't even know what we mean when we say ow. There's a thing causing us to say ow, and when we say ow, we're participating in a language game that is shared. But the ow thing isn't inside. The ow is outside in the game. But that's his focus in the second book, which is disagreeing with most of the stuff in the first book, which is not the Tractatus. That's philosophical investigations. And he finally says that you don't even know what's in your own box. You don't even know if there's a beetle in the box. Because the thing that makes you say ow is not something that you're really accessing, because ow is a learned concept. You don't know ow from birth. You know ow because you eventually learned over time that ow is associated to something that happens to you, which is negative. It's really interesting. It's a really good book. I recommend reading Wittgenstein. You recommend Borges. I'm recommending Wittgenstein. Philosophical Investigations. It's great.
Yesterday, I was with a friend and his dog. And when my friend plays with his dog and the dog bites a little bit his hand, my friend fakes. Oh, no, me dolió. It hurts. And the dog feels very empathetic.
The dog felt guilty that he hurt his owner.
Yes. And he stops to be aggressive.
Very interesting.
It's very fun.
Right. So even dogs are playing the game with us if it's simple enough.
Yes. But
if I say, if I start crying and talking about how, someone I know is going through a horrible time, and then I cry, and then I send you a link to my GoFundMe account and ask you to donate $50, and it's all a lie. It's horrible that it's a lie, but if I'm good at it, you don't know if I'm lying or I'm telling the truth. So that's what's interesting about language, is that it can be used for good, it can be used for evil, but it's all outside in this public space, and we're all just sort of it's like we're all playing ping pong with each other at the same time. And some of us are better at ping pong than others, and some of us are worse. And some of the ones who are really good at ping pong play ping pong for evil reasons, to get you to donate $50 to their GoFundMe when nobody's actually sick. And some people who are really good at it use it like magical spells. Like, for example, a great leader, when they make people follow them, that's a magical spell that they have cast over that group of people. That's what language is, magic. So when you see a video, have you ever watched Hard Day's Night, that Beatles?
Oh, no, I didn't.
So if you watch old videos of the Beatles playing live at events, and then they show the audience, you see 13-year-old girls just screaming and crying, just they can't handle it. So that song is a magical spell that's cast by those people in that moment on that group of people to cause them to cry and scream. And that's what's, I think, so cool about language, is that it's all just play. And you can get good at it. And if you get good at it, you can do a lot of cool stuff. But you have to be careful, because some people who are good at it are horrible people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Yeah. All right. Last question. Do you think we're living in a simulation?
Of course.
You do think so?
Yes.
Why do you think that?
No, not really. Not really.
Not really.
It's just shocking. But there is, I told you that I wanted to link the story of Borges to fake news. So in a more mundane meaning of simulation, I think we live in a simulation. Mass media is simulating a fake reality.
Are you talking about Baudrillard?
I don't know what that
Okay.
is.
Baudrillard, he wrote Simulacra and Simulation, and it's very, very much about that. I think you'd like it. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll send it to you. His name is Jean Baudrillard. He's French, or was French. I think he died in 2000 something. And his famous book is Simulacra and Simulation.
And what did he say?
So it's kind of the idea that it's been a while since I've read it, but a simulacra is a copy of the world, but it's not the world itself. But it can become the world if everyone falls into it. And if everyone falls into it, then it becomes a simulation. So, for example, I was talking to someone yesterday who said, I'm afraid to go to the United States because I'm worried that I'm going to get shot. Right? Why? Because there is all over the news this idea that people are just there are these mass shootings happening constantly, right? It's just all over the place, and it's being reported. I've never seen anyone get shot in my entire life. I've never even seen anyone get in a fight in my entire life. And I lived in New York City for 6 years. I never saw anything like that ever. So what happened was a simulation has been created that people accept as the world in a way, but that simulation is, as in a way, maintained by everyone's feeling that it's true based on something that seems big but is actually small. It looks big because it's on the news all the time. So that takes up a large amount of your mind space. In your mind, you say, oh, the thing that happened on the news. That's why people are afraid of terrorism, right? But if no one ever reported that, and that was never on the news, you would never have that idea, and you would never see it, and you would never hear about it. So the world would be different in a way.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's not fake news. It's just that's the simulation that we are living in. But that's just a very basic idea. He goes into some really interesting examples of different levels of simulations that society creates. It's pretty interesting.
Great.
I think you'd like it. What did you want to say about fake news?
No, not so much. But I think it is a problem, contemporary problem. Perhaps it happened in other times also, but I think it is very, very, very bad. Yes.
But what is fake news?
For example, we have our friend Luba.
Oh yeah.
And he lives in Russia.
She
Russia,
does.
right?
Yeah.
Yes, she lives in Russia, and our news and her news are very different.
Right.
I'm not here to say what is the truth, but if they are different, one of them or several of them are fake news. and
I
that
don't
is a
like the
problem.
word fake news because I don't think that you can have to have the idea of fake news, you need to say what's true. But how can you say what's true when you can constantly learn more about anything that happens? Like the same thing happened with COVID. Um, there's misinformation. According to who? Because the people who say this is misinformation have changed what's true over time as they get more information. So how do I know?
Yes,
And
but
whoever says it
sometimes
also has a bias, right? Like the news in the United States, they're biased. I'm not. So I'm just saying
yes, but
fake.
the media knows there is people in that media that knows that, for example, the picture they are putting in this notice, the news, that picture is not from that event, and
Okay.
they know that,
Okay. So that's
and
fake
they don't
news.
care. That is fake news
Okay. So you're
because
you're
they
saying
know it is not true.
okay. All right. Maybe then what's more interesting to me is biased news.
Yes, yes, it is also interesting. Yes.
I don't watch news anymore because I just assume that it's everything is biased. I'm just
But
focusing
yes,
on my own life.
for biased news, I think there is no solution.
Correct.
But for fake news, there is. I would like journals, the media to be more rigorous. If they know it is not true, don't say that.
I can just picture you going around the world to different news organizations and just doing exactly if it it's true, don't say it, and they'll just say, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Pablo. Sorry, sir. We won't do it anymore.
Yes,
We promise. Sorry about that."
that is my mission. I will travel with an helicopter
You're
all
gonna
around
change the
the
world.
world.
Yeah, love that for you. All right. Well, I think we can call it a day. I think we covered it pretty well. Is there anything we didn't talk about with Tlön, Uqbar, Orbis, Tertius that we should mention?
No, I think we covered it very, very, very good.
Yeah, about time for lunch. Let me know what you think of Baudrillard if you read any of that.
Great.
Pretty.
I think it is very linkable with the story, right?
Yeah, I think so. For sure. All right, well, thanks everybody for watching as well. We cut out a little bit in the middle, so I'm not sure if it's stopped and then we had some people drop off and then come back. So anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. We didn't take any questions today because we're doing a different sort of style, which is interesting. So hopefully we can do another one of these sometime, Pablo. That'd be cool. I'd
Would be
enjoy it.
great.
Thanks again for doing it. I
Me
appreciate
too.
it. And thank you for recommending Borges. Now I need to read more of his stuff. What's next?
Great.
What do I need to read next?
I think you have the Labyrinth translations, right?
Yes, I
The
do.
anthology.
Yeah.
I think Pierre Menard is fun. It's the next one.
Okay. All right.
It is about a man who decides to rewrite El Quijote.
He rewrites Don Quixote?
Yes, but he rewrites it exactly the same, but he didn't read it.
He never read it.
He never read it, but he writes the same book, exactly the same. It is very fun.
I'm confused. How can he know what's exactly the same?
I can't remember. I think he reads the biography of Cervantes and all the books Cervantes read and all the influences, something like that.
I do appreciate the sense of humor that that Borges has. He definitely seems to enjoy that sort of. He's very playful.
Yes, there is an excerpt very fun that Foucault quotes on the words and the things. Is the name of the book? Is that correct? The words and the things.
Huh?
Foucault. Michel Foucault.
I know Foucault, but I have not read any Foucault before. That's someone who's on my list, but I have not read.
Because the first quote of Foucault is an excerpt of Borges, very, very fun. I'm looking to it. Yes, let me read it to finish, because I think it's very fun.
Right.
The quote is the next. This book first arose out of a passage in Jorge Luis Borges, out of the laughter that shattered as I read the passage. All the familiar landmarks of my thought, our thought that bears the stamp of our age and our geography, breaking up all the ordered surfaces. Oh, let me share you the link and you read it.
You're gonna make me
You
read
want?
it. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, because I feel uncomfortable.
That's fine. I'll read it.
I send it to you by WhatsApp.
Yep, you can just send it in WhatsApp.
Or we have a chat here. Yes, we have.
Do we?
Yes.
Oh, you're right. We do.
There you have the link.
Okay, hold on. Let me pull it up. All right. Michel Foucault, 1970. This book first arose out of a passage in Borges, out of the laughter that shattered. As I read the passage, all the familiar landmarks of my thought, our thought that bears the stamp of our age and our geography, breaking up all the ordered surfaces and all the planes with which we are accustomed to tame the wild profusion of existing things, and continuing long afterwards to disturb and threaten with collapse our age-old distinction between the same and the other. This passage quotes a certain Chinese encyclopedia in which it is written that animals are divided into belonging to the emperor, B, embalmed, C, tame, D, suckling pigs, E, sirens, F, fabulous, G, stray dogs, H, included in the present classification, I, frenzied, J, innumerable, K, drawn with a very fine camel hair brush, and L, etc., M, having just broken the water pitcher, N, this is getting ridiculous. That from a long way off look like flies. In the wonderment of this taxonomy, the thing we apprehend in one great leap, the thing that by means of the fable is demonstrated as the exotic charm of another system of thought, is the limitation of our own, the stark impossibility of thinking that. That's really interesting. That
is his sense of humor, I think. He can express some thought very interesting and with some good humor.
Right, because there's something, it's such a contradictory system once it gets into naming the systems, because you could have one, they could all be in etc., right?
Yes. And I think the best is etc. is not the final one.
Right. Right. Yeah. Etc. is not the final one. Yeah. So what happens if you have an etc. that then has just broken a water pitcher? Then you're in trouble. Which one do you put it in? Or, yeah. So then you have, so I think Foucault's point is then you have to think, wait a second. My little window into the world is conditioned by Aristotle and his obsession with putting everything into a little box. So when I say I have a headache, what I'm saying is there's a thing that I have, and this is what I call it. But that's not what it is. That's what I'm used to calling it because my world has been... I think that putting things in boxes is normal. But if I were raised by alchemists, I wouldn't say I have a headache. I would say that there's a thing moving up the back of my head, and now it's moving up to the top, and it doesn't feel good. And now it's changing, and now it's behind my eyes, and because I was raised by alchemists, right? So it's really interesting. Yeah, that's a good one.
Great.
I like it. I think that's a good
Thank
point.
you, Luke.
Good point to end on for sure. Thanks for sharing. Let's do another one of these sometime soon.
Thank you, Luke, for letting me talk with you and to the viewers about Borges. I like it a lot.
If we do another one of these in the future, the only thing I would change would be that we choose something that everyone who may attend live can read in advance, that it's a little more readable to every level. So maybe something that's a little easier to read so that everyone can read it, and then they can actually maybe participate a little more in the conversation. So if we're going to do another one of these, I would want to, because this is written at an intermediate level English learner will struggle with this. Yeah.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Great idea.
All right, I'm gonna go have lunch. That's what I'm gonna do. What about you?
The same.
Perfect. Amazing.
Yes. And my time zone is 1 hour later.
So you're a little hungrier than I am.
Yes.
I love that.
Great, Duke. Thank you.
Thanks, Pablo. Talk to you later.
Goodbye.
Bye. All right. Thanks, everybody. I know this is a different style, but if there are any things that you want us to do in the future, I want to have another one of these conversations with Pablo. He's a really smart guy. So let me know. Recommend books, recommend stories, short stories. I would like to do something that everybody can read. We kind of just read it and then had a conversation about it. We did a summary at the beginning, but if you missed that part, it would be confusing to know what we're talking about. So let me know if you'd like to see more of these in the future, and I'll probably put out a poll on that later. Thanks everybody for joining. Don't forget to check out the website, link in the description, full course is there, and I'll see you all on Friday. All right, bye-bye.